Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the CDL Admin MasterClass presented by CDL PowerSuite. We're going to go through this today. Myself, Tim McLain, and Jonathan will be your hosts today. And hopefully, as we get through this, we're going to learn how to improve your documentation, reduce manual work, and build a more efficient, compliant admin process. I think it's probably more important now than that's ever been. We see that things are happening in the federal level. We're getting these audits. And strangely, I think most of you would probably be surprised to learn that the FMCSA will tell you all they've been doing is surveys. It is not actually an audit yet. So, and as you got up this morning, you can see a lot of state attorney general's offices are getting to these audits now. Texas has got a big one going today. And so hopefully, as we go through this class, not hopefully, we can give you the tools to make you successful and not have to worry about audits. A little bit of my background. I'm co-chair of the CVTA Oversight Committee right now. Was on the board of directors with CVTA for 8 years. Former entry-level driver task force member where we met quarterly with the administrator or acting administrator of the FMCSA. Went through a lot of chairs there. Been involved with over 100,000 students that we've graduated out through the Swift Academies over my career before I left, and actually at about 16 days a year ago. My experience with CDL PowerSuites was one of the most fulfilling things in my career. The last few years I was at Swift Transportation. It was almost as if these guys had taken my wish list of all the things that I wanted throughout my career as far as managing multiple campuses. And so when I left Swift, and the founder of the company, Jason Boudreau, asked me if I'd ever thought about coming to work for them. And I've been blessed to be able to work with the likes of like Jonathan. Jonathan's like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of CDL PowerSuites. He's responsible for training any new members as they come on there, or any continuous education that goes through there. And, you know, he's a committee member with a National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools, and probably has his fingers in a few more things other than that. He's a genius. You get me to do something, I do it. I couldn't tell you how it works. Jonathan can. You know, you tell me to turn the light switch on and it works. That's all I need to know. Jonathan can tell you how it works. And so Jonathan was one of the original PowerSuite team members. I think him and Luke were the first ones I ever met, besides Jason up in Spokane, Washington. So as we progress through this today, we really want to focus on the admin aspect of this. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, Jonathan and I've had conversations in the past is that we see a lot of opportunity to the system not being used fully, or other schools. We're very unique in the advantage that we get to see, because we work with so many of you guys and other schools, municipalities, and companies, well over 500 now, that we see that there's a lot of opportunity in here. You know, and it always kind of centers around, sometimes admins really don't know what they do on. Issues with your admin process. You know, what does exactly, you know, does a strong workflow look like? And the cost of actually doing stuff the old way, manual work. And then we're going to go over the key takeaways. And wanted to add one more thing in here. James is taking questions. If you want to use the chat box, and we will have a spot later in the program where we'll stop and ask questions. And also, we are doing a PDF checklist that we're going to send out to each of you who attended this webinar today. It's kind of like an SEV, self-evaluation report, or a SWOT analysis of your admin program. And it'll walk you through there and maybe identify some weaknesses or some opportunities to improve. So each of y'all will get that at the conclusion of this webinar as well. So I wanted to make sure I did my part that James asked me to do. I almost forgot about it. Fine. Awesome. Do what, Jonathan?
Sorry?
I said, what was that?
Oh, no. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. I'm excited to go through this here with you. And I'll let Tim keep rolling with it, and I'll hop in a little bit.
So, one of the things, and it was kind of a unique over the last few weeks, months that we've been doing these seminars. Again, like I said, we've really identified a lot of opportunities in here. And, that your CDL program, your training program is really only as strong as your admin. I know that when I was running up to 14 campuses, if I really wanted to know what was going on, you sit down and spend some time with a person who's doing the admin part of the program. And another part I just kind of want to point out as we go through this, that that your admin's kind of your radar O'Reilly of your organization, or your battle control center. All the information flows through them. They know exactly what's going on. And also some of the things that we can kind of touch base on as we go through this. I know there's a lot of small schools where you're possibly the owner, you're the admin, you're the instructor, and other support staff. So we want to address some of those things that can make your life a little better as we go through this today as well. So again, going to go over all this stuff, what admin team's on, enrollment, from the enrollment to the training to the completion, from the beginning to the end. Most organizations we've seen, they start with actually beginning the genesis of it is the student onboarding, the enrollment agreements, the DOT cards, the theory completion, behind the wheel documentation, instructor communication both ways to and from, and the graduation records, and FMCSA audit readiness. Can't talk this morning. But also, it's not just the FMCSA. I mean, most of us have VA audits we have to go through, other state audits. And the thing that we've seen over the last couple of days, I've been watching the news, and then it was kind of like a big news article out of Texas today. State attorney general offices are getting involved in looking in the schools as well. So again, all this really points to the fact that we need to have our admins empowered and entrusted and give them the tools they need to have to be successful. So as we go through this, guys, let's go to the common workflow points that we're talking about. So as we go through this, ask yourself, are your student files complete before training starts? Do you have everything you need to have that DQ file for that student? Do your instructors know what must be documented? Can you quickly provide your students' progress? Would your records hold up in an audit? Not only an audit, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but eventually, Jonathan and I were fortunate enough to be at publicly funded truck driving school conference a few weeks ago and talking to Patrick Demons over compliance. At some point in time, and they're already doing this, guys, they're going to trace back problematic drivers all the way back to the TPR number. Will your records hold up to that? You got to ask yourself, and as you go through this, and as Jonathan does this, realize, when you get an audit or a survey or a spot inspection, it's kind of like when you drive through the scale house, you always tell the drivers have their dash neat, everything organized, because you want to look like you've got your stuff together, like everything's current, and they'll let you roll for there. If you go for here and they start finding a bunch of mistakes, they're going to start digging deeper into the audit, deeper into the weeds. So as we go through this, start thinking about that. What are your weaknesses? What are your exposures? And as we go through this, hopefully we'll have some really good questions. And I think Jonathan's going to bring some really good points and some opportunities that maybe that we can help you strengthen those potential weak spots.
Beautiful.
So, Jonathan, if you would, I'll let you work your magic, and I will sit here and continue to be quiet for a few minutes.
No worries. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate the very generous introduction. Again, my name's Jonathan, and I am Director of Customer Success at CDL PowerSuite. So, any new customer that comes through our system and existing customer, they deal with me, and I help them work on learning a software system, as well as one of my favorite parts is problem solving workflows and helping administrators, whether it is a CDL school administrator or even just a private training provider that is managing a new training program at your business. So really anyone, and helping them work on what that looks like. So as I go through my slides today, here's kind of what I'll be covering. Everything I'm going to be doing is I'm pretty much going to be showing things that an administrator should have in their toolkit, as things come up in your business, whether that's as Tim mentioned, an audit, whether that's funding for your students, or making sure that your students and staff are successful. I'll sort of bring up what that looks like, some of the workflows that we've seen for successful CDLs programs, and then I'll let Tim wrap it up here with some of our solutions that we have. So going through here, enrollments, digital records, documentation, instructor accountability, progress, and reporting. So enrollment sets the tone. I always say, when I talk to someone, what's your enrollment process? What is the process that the student takes from the first time they call you about coming to CDL school, all the way through getting their license? Do you have agreements? Do you have a contract written up for that student? How do you keep track of the documentation that they need? How do you know that no one's slipping through the cracks? Do you have a system in place where you're going to make sure that if someone calls you on the phone, and is really interested in CDL in getting training, that we follow up with them, that we make sure that we have communication with that person? And then, going on communication, what are your school's communication or program's communication methods? Do you have texting messaging? Do you have an email chain link set up? Do you have what your phone system management? What does that look like? These are really keys to success, to making sure that people that are interested in training are actually making it to your door, and that when they get there, you are making sure that they've agreed to your requirements for training and are starting to collect those documents and signatures. Do you have a file collection system? As we know, in the CDL realm, there's a lot of documentation. It's, whether that's medical cards or drug tests or anything like that, we got to keep track of that. My biggest thing with this is, no one's asking for it at the time, right? You're not going to instantly submit those documents to anyone, but 2 years down the line, 6 months down the line, there's always a chance that it comes up. And having a system in place to make sure you can easily access that documentation, that drug test, that medical card, things like that. Are you collecting the right documents? Do you know what documents to collect? So making sure that you haven't missed anything. I have a lot of times where people ask about drug tests. Do I have to actually drug test my trainees? Well, the FMCSA says, you have to either collect a drug test, or they have to self-certify, saying that they follow all agreements. And when it comes to substances and driving. So do you have both of those? Another one, a big topic or common one, is a motor vehicle record. Do you collect a motor vehicle record from your drivers? This isn't a required document, but from where we've seen, collecting a motor vehicle record be important, because we're protecting the student as well. If they're coming to Washington to go to CDL training, but they had a DUI or infraction in the state of Georgia, they may never be able to get a job. You pull that motor vehicle record. And so what we'd a lot of times do is we'll have them, if they have something on their record, we don't deny them training, but we do ask them to go to a few local companies and say, hey, would you hire this person? Would you hire me as a driver with this infraction on my record? And if they get a couple companies to say yes, that infraction is within our realm of hiring, absolutely, we'll want to get them trained to get their CDL. But if they're never going to be able to get a job, we don't want them to waste their time and money to never be able to prosper from it, right? So things like that. And then really just making sure that there's a system in place to make sure none of those slip through the cracks. Is there anything telling you that this student doesn't have a medical card yet or doesn't have a drug test on file? Really, there's so much admins do, and they're talking to so many people in a day, whether that's your own instructors, potential students, existing students. There's questions coming 1,000 miles a minute, and we know that. So what ways are you making sure that nothing gets missed is a big part of this as well. And I'm sure everyone's experienced that, where something happens, you got to pull that document. Where is it? Did we have it? I swear to God, I swear we had it. But what systems do you have in place for that? Consistent documentation. What does that look like? So making sure that those records are the same for everyone. Kind of what I just left off on. Nothing slips through the cracks. Have everything. Is that drug test within the last 30 days? That was that motor vehicle record clean? Things like that. Also, when it comes to even like scheduling. So have you made sure that your student is scheduled for training? Do you have a system to make sure that because you have all the documents, they can start that behind the wheel training? Are you scheduling on a daily basis so you know where your students are at? Things like that. For example, we actually at our partner school, we had an accident where someone actually hit one of our trucks. All right, so while a student was driving, they hit the trucks. They hit a pedestrian car hit our truck, and that took that truck out of commission for a month and a half before we could get all the repairs done. And as you know, that's money that's not being, or that's money down the drain if you can't have a student in that truck and fill that with someone. So we were able to use our scheduling tools to prove that truck was out on the road for 6-7 hours a day with a student, proving exactly how many students we weren't able to train over that month and a half. And through that, the insurance company could validate how much you lost in that time frame. So keeping those records really tight can be huge in an accident, and making sure that everything is accurate and everything looks the same, right? Can you defend your business with that documentation? And that really, it comes down to an audit, comes down to insurance, comes down to anything like that, drug testing. So as a trainer administrator or a training administrator, you are really the lifeline of the CDL school or program from my view. And that's because students come to you, instructors come to you, everyone kind of revolves around what you do and what you control. So from here, really that instructor accountability. We all know that these guys, most people that are instructors are great truck drivers. They probably are masters at their craft of driving trucks and what that looks like, but are they necessarily the best at logging events and keeping up with compliance and making sure that those students are successful? Maybe that's more of a learned skill that they're learning through becoming trainers. And so how are you assisting them in making sure that your students are successful, making sure that you have all the documentation that you need? Also, do you know how the student perceives your instructor? Do you have any sort of evaluations at the end of training or during training to make sure that your instructors or your students feel they're taken care of, or that they're getting the best education that they can, right? Are you internally auditing yourself? Have you checked in on those documents that you're collecting from instructors? Are you making sure that those the documents have the correct time amounts in, especially with in states with hour requirements? How are you keeping track of that? Where's the student? Um, where's that instructor's record keeping at level at? So making sure we have a system in place to keep up with our instructors and our students, because if all of that is falling into place that we want the way we want it to, I see that student being more successful, right? Progress and visibility, very similar. Do your instructors, like we just said, amazing truck drivers, but do they have that system in place? What sort of documentation have you given your instructors to be able to keep track of that student progress? You have a way to see their tracking and be able to see whether a student is struggling, whether they need more time, whether they're not ready to test, whether they are ready to test. What ways are you able to see that at a moment's notice so that you don't have a student that's been there for 4 weeks and they really aren't ready yet, and you didn't know about it, right? Because who are they going to go to when they're struggling at the end of 4 weeks? I'm guessing they're probably going to come to you and say, I don't know what to do, right? So how can we keep track of that to prevent those things from happening, prevent those things from falling through? um that comes down to, again, instructor documentation. But what does that look like for you? How do we, is that paper, is that digital training logs, whatever it may be? But how can you look at those and make sure we're not missing any students? And then, so reasons you may need to report. um we've said it already, but audits, funding, future employment, um all of these things, WIOA funding, VA funding, state reports, hours logged, things like that. There's a lot of times where you're going to have to pull a student report. And what does that look like? How do we um, easily access that so that when an audit happens or the VA comes around every 3 months and needs their information, it's not taking us hours upon hours or days to collect that information. So keeping it together and making sure that it's all complete. You have checks and balances to make sure that it's complete. So that's really where that sort of stuff is where we've seen successful training programs flourish, is where they have that on hand. They have everything filled out incompletely or completely, excuse me, and making sure that we have all of that ready to go whenever it's needed, whether there's an accident in a truck, whether there's an audit, whatever it may be. So those are really the key points that we've seen for successful programs when they're ready to, when they have all that on hand and ready to go. Yeah. So give us some time for some questions. Happy to answer any questions, or Tim can answer questions. Let us know.
We have one from Andrea Edwards. How long after CDL training should the trainee be scheduled for the CDL test?
That's really, well, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, you go first, Tim.
I mean, that is really so state specific. Again, like I've had as many as 14 schools across the country I was overseeing. And you got some states like Tennessee where once they are signed off as being proficient and we go in, we can't even, we got a time period where you can't test. I mean, can't even schedule them. Then you got so many days before you can test. And then you got some states that if they were signed off being proficient today, you could go ahead and schedule the test today. So that there's really not a standard time, and Jonathan, maybe you share what they do there in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, like Tim said, it's really state specific. I've heard absolute horror stories of California being 60, 90 days out from just having a test spot available. So you're end up having to pre-schedule before people are ready, which I think is an absolute mess. But or some people testing same day that they decide they're ready. So like Tim said, in Washington, it's all third party. So some states allow you to test your own drivers as long as you did not train them. Where Washington does not allow that. They either have to be tested by a complete third-party tester or a state testing facility. So really check with your state, check with your available testing times, and that will really dictate when you can make that test happen for that.
Yeah, and the whole thing is, it's not when they finish their CDL training, because sometimes there's an exception to the rule. It's like where Jonathan and I were a couple of weeks ago. There's a school that after they actually test and get their CDL, they still have 2 more weeks of school to go. So it's once you sign off and say they're proficient, so each program's a little different. But again, it's the state.
And then, as I'm sure you may already know, making sure you submit to the TPR within 48 hours of proficiency. So that's really the big one. And then getting that test scheduled comes next.
Was the question we had. So move on.
All right, guys. We got a couple more slides here. I'll let Tim take it away. Love to hear some more questions. What's that, Tim?
So take it away, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I did my part, I swear.
How would you...
Okay, let's, we got one more question that popped in.
Yeah, that's a good Jonathan question.
Hey, this is Caitlin at Point. We were wondering how we would generate analytics in the suite.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a full reports tool to generate individual student information to a CSV export or Excel spreadsheet, which is really nice. You can generate that in seconds of all of their demographic information, training hours, things like that, as well as each student profile has all of their hours and trainings, scores, everything, and that can be exported into a single document at any time. So Caitlin, anytime you have a question, give me a call. I think we talked recently, so give me a call or shoot me an email, or let's schedule a meeting, and I can show you those tools.
I
was waiting to see. It looked like somebody had their hand raised.
Yeah, we got Aaron with his hand raised, and see if he has a good answer. I'll give you a second, and then we'll get back to you.
All right. We'll keep rolling.
All right, we're rolling. Respect everybody's time. So as we're thinking about this, Dave, what is the cost of manual work? If you're sitting there and you're doing paper documentation and you got instructors that you're entrusting, filling out evaluations daily, files that are being built, somewhere, somehow, somebody's got to audit that or check and make sure that they're in compliance. That takes time, a massive amount of time. It's almost like in some of the books they call it almost like a trust tax. You can't trust that it's all there, so you have to go back and you audit this. And that takes away time from you where you could be on the bridge of your ship, steering your ship. Now you're down in the engine room, making sure all the parts are there. So manual work, without without being automated, has a real cost to it. I can tell you through my experience, once we automated and went paperless, there's not at those Swift academies now, again, because that's my point of reference for 34 years. There's nobody there who's not actually got their hands on students now, because all the file building, the auditing, the scanning, all this record keeping and is not there anymore. So look at how you run your day, or the amount of risk you're exposing yourself to because you don't take the time to audit all that. And then, there's always the one-offs. Somebody gets sick and they end up taking their packet with them, or they misplace it, or, there's been cases where out on the range where the weather has, destroyed paperwork. And then I think we've all seen the pencil pushing technique where all of a sudden all the scores look the same. And, so as you're doing all this, you're going through your paper, your spreadsheets, memory, all that, it kind of creates risk. Again, like I said, unless you're spending all this time going through all this stuff, you don't know if there's a required missed signature. There might be some missing documents. Not so much as duplicate data errors sometimes, but you'd be surprised just how, somebody miskey something or just misplace something in there, and the inconsistent communication, and when you're going back to your staff and you're having to ask for things, and so that kind of leads to burnout. And I can tell you from my experience, and you always wonder, how will my instructors react to automation? It's like all human nature. I know I've been on site at one customer. I was kind of treated like, a little bit of resistance until about midday, where the admin came out and asked them about the packets. And they said, well, the packets are going away. This is what's replacing it. Then I was everybody's best buddy. So think about that. All the time you're wasting, the risk you expose yourself to. And none of it is sometimes intentional. It's just we get busy, we get in our whirlwinds, and things get missed. And last thing you need in this environment, I mean, we all see the news. Trucking schools are on the radar. You got somebody come check your stuff. You want it all there. Next slide, James. So, it says we're talking about here for going from reactive to proactive. I kind of like, any of you been for any quality management, and you look at things that one of the things that you want to do is keep a compelling scoreboard. How do you know if you're winning or losing if you don't have a compelling scoreboard? That's one of the things I loved about this at CDL PowerSuites. Within 15 minutes across 10 campuses, I could tell how every student was going, how every school was going. And it allowed me, and I know we're using the word reactive to proactive, but what it did is kept me from, in the past, for most of my career, everything I dealt with was a lag measure. By the time all that paperwork got to you, it's too late to really do anything about it. This is documentation for the history of what's happened. With our system, with CDL PowerSuite, now you're dealing with leads. You can actually see things happening in real time. You can see patterns developing. You can see if the students have any issues out there, because they're able to give feedback at least twice a day. All that puts you in a point where you're proactive. And like one customer told me when I was at his second location we were setting up, he told me the biggest relief is that he could sit at his office and look at the other campuses and absolutely not have to worry about an audit. He knew everything was compliant, and he could see all that from there. So, I think in this environment, we all need to be a lot more proactive, work on our leads instead of our lags, because once we get into a lag situation, a lot of times the students are even gone. And so it's even that much more difficult. This system puts you into a system where you're absolutely dealing with real-time information. And one of the cool things about it, as we continue to grow in here, and I know there's a question about analytics. They haven't seen anything yet, Jonathan. That's only going to get better. And things that just blow your mind. But seriously, I just kind of recap and go through, talk about some of these key takeaways. You got to make sure you give your admin all the tools they possibly need. If you're a small school and you're the admin and you're the instructor, you got to get out from behind the desk. I promise you, if you only go out on your range at certain times or so often, I promise you your staff knows that. And it doesn't mean they got any bad intent, but humans will be humans. If we're not structured, we tend to wander off the path a little bit. As you go through these audits, and I think we were talking about some of the things, is that a lot of this stuff has got to deal with, lesson plans not being complete, or no lesson plans, or improper, incomplete paperwork, so that we can actually help with. And as we sit here and we talk about all this admin stuff, And it sounds like there's a lot of responsibility, because it is. And one thing, as a school owner or director of a school, uh, one of the things that was a weakness on my point, a lot of times when you see something not done at the admin level, it's because they got too much pride. They don't want anybody to think they're not doing their job, and they're trying to do, taking care of that urgent, important task in front of them and forgetting and circling back to the other stuff. With this system, you don't have to worry about that. There's absolutely frees up your admin to put them in more of a quality control, as instead of just trying to get a lot of work done. So, the bottom line is, as we're going through all this, we're not adding more to the admin work. The goal is to have more efficient, better control of what the admin does, and actually decrease their workload, but increase by 100% their information at their fingertips, and they can see what's happening, when it's happening in real time, and identify anything potentially that's a detriment to the student progressing, or we got a problem in a lead indicator type form, so we can make small problems go away before they become big problems. So that's the bottom thing. Empower your admins and trust them, and give them the proper tools, whether it's this system or some other system. I don't think going forward anybody's going to be very successful in this environment we're in right now if you don't have something very strong to keep you in an audit-ready position at all times.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. I think I just want to reiterate, like, the admin of a program, a training program, like I said before, I'm repeating myself, but everyone goes to them, questions, students, instructors. Something goes wrong, an owner, they're going to go to the admin and see what happened. And so we know that at CDL PowerSuite. So really, our goal is to keep those tools, that information at your fingertips, as Tim said, and be able to prove it, and not worry, not have that thought in the back of your head that something's missing or something's going wrong or something could go wrong. You're going to know it before anything ever happens. So, yeah.
Well said.
Any other questions? Well, there's no questions, no worries. We are available always by email, afterwards, phone call. I'll give you my phone number. You can text me if you want. I don't care. But yeah, we're happy to help, whether you're using PowerSuite or not. Compliance questions, that's our main goal here, is CDL compliance. So we love questions. We love to help and see what we can do. Oh, and then we are sending out a super cool document of like a checklist, an admin checklist, so you guys know and see what your strengths or anything you may be missing in the admin workflow, anything that, and you can go through that and see where you're at, see if you have everything you need already, or if there's anything you may want to improve. So we'll be sending that out. Please use that. We'd also love your feedback on it if you have it, if you can as well.
And we're sending out the recording as well, aren't we?
Absolutely. We're going to send out the recording. Generally, we post it to YouTube, so it takes us a few hours to a day to get that downloaded and uploaded back to the YouTubes.
I think that was the last question I saw.
Amazing.
Well, we certainly appreciate everybody's time. We know you're all busy and you have a lot to do. And again, I think we all have the same goal. We just want to make it a safer environment for all of us out on the road with our families. And to Jonathan's point, anything we can do to help you, we're here and willing to help.
Awesome. Yeah, I see that question from Christopher. How do you change a private entity to an actual school? So there's going to be a bit to that. Tim might know more from a carrier perspective, but essentially, you need to work with the TPR to go from a private training provider to a public training provider. And then once you transfer to being a public training provider, that's when you're getting involved with your state. So that means like here in Washington, any CDL schools have to fall under the Department of Education. So that's who's setting our requirements, our compliance requirements, our hours requirements. And so really that's where it goes from. Some states are on the federal minimum and there's not a whole lot. And some states you have to get fully registered. Like in Texas, if you become a private school, you have to be registered with the Texas TWC, Texas Workforce Commission. Anyone that is not on the Texas Workforce Commission cannot train. So really comes down to changing that business, maybe creating a new business, getting different insurance, and registering with your state.
Okay. And it's like some states like Idaho or Board of Education, Tennessee Higher Education. So it bounces around from one to the other. I think that was probably it, Jonathan.
All right. Appreciate your time, everybody. Let us know if you have any questions or if anything else comes up. We're happy to help. Have a great day.
Again, thank you for attending, everyone.